So I was inspired by a conversation I was having with a few people, and I wanted to share something with you guys. And that was really, that started off at the beginning of my journey, and it really set the precedent for the kind of where I am now, in the sense that it really got me to question everything that I had been told for years, and it brought me back to my first kind of approach when it had to do with mental illness. So when I was 15, I saw A Beautiful Mind, and I remember thinking, they are not crazy. He is not crazy. The doctors just don't understand. Like, there's something that they're missing. And everyone around me was making fun of me, and all my friends were like, dude, you're insane, shut up, do you know how stupid and ignorant you sound? And I remember leaving that day and going to therapy, and talking to my therapist and just telling her, I don't believe that there's something wrong. Like, I think that the entire puzzle hasn't been put together yet. And she smiled at me. And I was like, is there any way that you could help me work in a psych ward so that I can like prove that they're not crazy? And then she smiled again and looked at me and said, sweetie, maybe you should consider studying psychiatry. And that led me on to really just, I went down a rabbit hole of psychology and why do we behave a certain way? Why do some people act a certain way? That was something that was always in me. Like, I always questioned, like, why is that person mad and the other person's happy? And they grew up in the same household. And I think a lot of these questions started from my own upbringing. My dad, the way that he would react, I'm just like, I wonder why he's like this. And my mom and my aunt, they are so different. And again, I was just kind of like, it's so interesting how one of them can have a more subtle approach and the other one's so much more, straightforward. So I was just curious what brought up all of these behaviors that, that we as humans have. And when I was a freshman in college, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So instead of continuing and going to school, I realized that was out of the question and I needed to heal myself. That was about a 7-year journey of me trying to find medication. Well, not me, my mom and doctors trying to find medication that would keep me stable and help my chemical imbalance stabilize. And I remember asking my doctors, I'm like, can you show me this chemical imbalance? And they never had an answer for me. And I think that's part of why I always questioned a lot of what I was told, even though, it was the only option, because when I was diagnosed 12 years ago, I don't feel like we had the resources that we have now, and people are more outspoken and, they're sharing their stories to hopefully inspire others to look at different modalities. So anytime that I would look for inspiration or for someone that had my diagnosis, they couldn't relate to my, I couldn't relate to them. I couldn't relate to them. I realized that my relationship with my disorder was one where I felt disempowered, and I think a lot of people with a mental illness feel, disempowered. Like, this is happening to me, and I'm a victim of my environment or of just life. And when I started to work with a new psychiatrist to get off medication, who was doing orthomolecular psychiatry, and she did exposure therapy and just more radical different things that I was already exposed to. I remember that I had been seeing her for a few months, I got to Colombia. I was going to start seeing her now face to face because we had been doing it via Zoom. Well, no, not Zoom, Skype. And I walked in and we were talking, and she was trying to find out like what I was feeling, and I just kept saying, I'm just anxious. And she looks at me and she's like, what is this anxious thing you talk about? And I was like, what? You're a fucking doctor. Shouldn't you know what this is? Literally, those were my words. And she looks at me and she's like, no. Just because I'm a doctor does not mean that I know what it means to you, what anxiety means. What does it represent? And I couldn't give her an answer. I was just like, it means I have a chemical imbalance. It means there's like something wrong with my brain. And she kept questioning that. She was like, but what does that represent to you? And it would frustrate me more, and I would get angry because I couldn't, one, communicate how I felt. I didn't even know how. And two, I had let the word bipolar, chemical imbalance, anxiety, I just slapped them on to not dive deeper into anything. And I'm not saying that's the case for everyone, but I bring this up because anytime that I talk to anyone and I'm like, so how are you feeling? They're like, I'm anxious. And I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? You know, I'm anxious. I'm overwhelmed. I'm like, okay, why are you getting upset? And I know why. Because I remember how upset I was. And if I'm telling you I'm in pain right now, and then you tell me, no, you're not. Actually, you are, you think you're in pain, then you just took away the reasoning to why I've been acting like this. So I'm gonna feel attacked because now it's like, oh, it's not because of this. Now I have to own that I'm acting like this. And we don't want to. And on another end, you feel like I am devaluating what you're experiencing. And when I talk about anxiety and depression and bipolar and mental illnesses not being a mental illness, it's actually unresolved trauma and the same patternings kind of repeating over and over again. I'm not trying to devaluate your pain or your experience. That's why I still say that I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. That's why I still say that I have manic and depressive tendencies, because I don't want people to think that I am here shaming or pointing fingers and just saying, you know what, get the fuck over it, move the fuck on, because it's not like that. But it's more of, get curious. What does it mean to you when you say I'm depressed? What does that mean to you? Because I used that for a while after that. I wouldn't dive deeper into how I was feeling because it was way too scary. And when I started working with that doctor, she started to kind of connect the dots of why it was scary for me to feel anything else and why it was scary to dive deeper. And when I got to kind of the root of it, it was I grew up in a very unstable household. My parents were getting separated, and that separation was probably like a 1.5 year long process, if not more, where my dad would constantly do things to like shame my mom, different things like that. And we ended up leaving Florida because he got upset and totally trashed our house. So why am I sharing that? Because my security was put in danger, not explicitly, but that's how I perceived it. So I started to grow up and very much was like, okay, I don't live in a safe space to express myself. There's enough going on, so I just need to kind of put everything down. On the other side, anger was acceptable. My dad, if I cried, he would lose his shit and he just couldn't handle it. But if I got upset and I just got mad and, didn't like show emotion, I was just like kind of frozen in place, that, he kind of showed some sort of like, oh, I'm proud of her type of thing. So I picked up from a really young age, okay, if I cry, I'm gonna get in trouble. But if I get mad, no one's gonna yell at me, no one's gonna say anything, right? So it kept trickling on to as I got older, where I wouldn't get into that vulnerable state because I felt like I would get in trouble, or someone would be upset, and I felt safer in a place of anger. So I didn't go to sadness, I went straight to anger. And even if I was happy, I would get happy, but if anything didn't go the way that in my brain I wanted it to, I went straight to anger. And it wasn't even that I was angry, it was that I felt like my expectations weren't being met, and there can be a sense of like rejection or fear, or I'm not enough, or whatever. But I still didn't know how to identify those emotions and those feelings. So next time that you say, hey, I'm anxious, or I'm overwhelmed, or I have a chemical imbalance, I don't want you to think that by me telling you, get a bit curious to what that means, that I'm saying that your experience, your pain, the suffering that you've gone through is not valid. I'm just saying, okay, all right, you are anxious. What does that mean? What does that mean right now? Does that mean that you're scared? Does that mean that you're overwhelmed? Does that mean that you're scared because of the uncertainty that's going on right now? Really start diving deeper into what that word means for you. And the next time that you find yourself excusing yourself, again, I was the queen of doing this. If anyone ever said anything like, hey, my mom would always tell me, hey, I don't think you should be watching that show. I think it could be a little bit more stimulating. Like, Mom, I have enough with my chemical imbalance. Stop. And it was just a way for me to avoid having to deal with people disagreeing with how I was acting or behaving. So I'm not saying that's the case for everyone, but I see it enough that I wanted to share my experience, and I just wanted to invite you guys to get more playful. Don't be so hard on yourself, and I know that's hard because when you've been conditioned to kind of grow up to that, it's really tough to get yourself out of that. But it's coming from a place of love and compassion, and just genuinely saying, okay, what does this mean to me when I tell people this? Again, anytime that someone would tell me something, they're like, hey, do you want to go do something? And I didn't want to do it. Instead of just saying I don't want to do it, I'd be like, I'm like super overwhelmed today and I can't. Instead of just saying, you know what, thank you so much for the invitation, I have plans already, or I honestly don't have any interest in going. And being okay with that. Not having to cover it up because I can't deal with saying no to someone. So I invite you guys all to start diving deeper into what you're kind of saying and just see where that leads you. I hope that this resonates with someone and that it helps you. If it does in any way, I uploaded an inner child meditation. It's on my bio, so you can click on it. It takes you straight to my YouTube channel, and I will be adding more meditations and different things so that you guys can use all of these tools at home and not feel like, okay, you're telling me all of this, but what do I do now? I hope you have a magical day. I love you all so much. Just remember, as we heal